Hello everyone, I'm making a steampunk cool lady, and something's not right. What's wrong? Something feels off about my outfit. I don't feel steampunk at all. Well, I didn't have much doll clothes in your closet, so this is the best I could do. Oh, can I steal the Dulver Makings mask? What? No, that's rude and it'll spoil the video. Plus, I don't think she'll like it if you take her clothes. Okay, we do need to make more clothes sometime though. Well, hello everyone, I'm Sparkles, and today I'm going to be making a badass steampunk plague doctor type cool lady. I'm super excited, and she's one of my favorites, so let's get started. Before we start, this doll has a little history. I originally came up with this plague doctor steampunk general idea about a year or two, I think, with this sketch. I love this little sketch of a head so much. But I'm keeping the general design the same, but she looks a little bit different. I think this will be so cool. I'm going digital art today, which was fun, but I don't have Procreate or anything, so it's kind of choppy. But I think the drawing still came out. I'm not too sure what this doll is, but she might be from that same company or line or whatever as the previous Christmas tree doll was. Maybe Disney Descendants? I'm really not sure, so please tell me in the comments if you know who she is. Anyway, first step is to remove her hair and head, and oh my god, whoever made this doll really doesn't want you to remove her head. There's a weird wall of plastic around the inside of her head, which is making the neck pick difficult to remove. I keep at it for a little bit, but I did have to inevitably bring out the sharp pointy thing and cut down that wall. It worked! Now we remove her hair guts in the factory paint. These days I'm resorting to scraping the inside through the neck hole and then cutting a slit in the back of her head and actually get the gunk out. Although I do scrape through the slit too. These sentences sound so weird. Anyway, time to use acetone to remove her factory paint. She's nice and clean, so I take her outside to spray her with Mr. SuperClear. Don't forget your mask. I bring her in and start drawing with my watercolor pencils and chalk pastels, listed in the description. It wasn't until I got to her lips I discovered a problem. Her smile. I kind of want a neutral or mad looking face, and the molding on her mouth was way too pronounced to be able to draw it. So before I seal in the previous layer, which makes it susceptible to my clumsiness, I bring out the epoxy sculpt, which I need more of, and mix up the tiniest amount I will probably ever need and fill in her smile lines. I let this dry overnight, and while I did, I panicked I wouldn't be able to color match. The next day came, and I had to paint her if I didn't want her to have gray patches around her mouth. I mixed some cheap acrylic paint and mashed it to her like purse so I wouldn't mess up her face. Once it looked good, I went to town on her face, and once it finally dried opaque, I realized it doesn't match. The paint dries darker. I was already frustrated, and I briefly thought to give her vitiligo, which would have been beautiful, but I'll save it for a different doll. One thing I learned is that chalk pastels fix a world of hurt. I actually sealed her with Mr. SuperClear this time, and I continue with my watercolor pencils. I'm finally done with the pencil, so I go in with my acrylic paint to brighten up her scleras and give her some striking highlights. I meant to make her left eye blind because that's where the cut is, but it kind of turned into heterochromia, which I tend to do a lot, but I actually love how it turned out. It's so striking and it complements her. Although the attempted smile remover with the epoxy sculpt didn't go the way I planned, I know what to do for next time and what I need to change and stuff. That's the thing I love about art. You're always learning and growing, and if you mess up, you know what not to do for next time. Anyway, I sprayed her one last time and now it's time for her hair. I kind of want to give her a Hannah Hart undercut, so I go in with flocking. I used one I already had, so it's kind of dark red burgundy. I used Fabri-Tac, which was not a very good idea. Tacky glue worked much better on the next layer. I left a V to root in with a fire truck red acrylic yarn. By the way, I got this yarn from Dollar Tree. There were like 3 in a pack and it was more than enough for what I needed, but you can easily make a whole head of hair if you wanted to. If you find them, I recommend. Anyway, when I'm done rerouting, I used Fabri-Tac to keep the hair in her head. It worked much better this time. I wanted to have her hair go to one side, but when I made it into a mohawk, it looked really cool. I debated for a little bit, but I ended up trimming her hair with an eyebrow razor and used water and hairspray to style it. Nice! I thought she looked a little like a Karen at first, but it calmed down a bit and I like it a lot now. Time for clothes. This will be a doozy. Okay, first I took some cotton and I made this kind of shape for the neckline to make kind of an on from Persona type of thing. What do you call that? By the way, I've been loving watching my boyfriend play Persona 5 Strikers recently, and I want to make at least one Phantom Thief. I'm thinking Sophie, but tell me what you think in the comments. Sorry, I got distracted. Anyway, I made that shape for the neckline and set it aside. Now let me complain for a second about something. I wanted to try out Warbler for the first time because I want something flat and something I can form and will keep it shape. But the only Warbler I could find was this gigantic 30 by 40 sheets, and I only needed maybe 5 to 10 inches. I didn't want to order online because I'm on a budget, so I used the next best thing I have, which was Fun Foam. I used my heat gun to heat up on a spot, and I form it to the doll's body, and it actually works really good. I mark where I want to cut it, and I rinse and repeat for the other cup. The front and the back were a little complicated. I used the seam lines on the doll to mark my foam, but this doll was curvy, and it's kind of difficult to make it line up, but I did it, and I have all my pieces now. I cut out small lines of fabric to attach the pieces together. I tell you, Teddy was my best friend during this project. I then painted it with acrylic paint. Word of advice, please prime your foam before you paint it the final color. I painted about 5 layers of tan, and when it still wasn't opaque, I gave up and painted it over with white to cover up my dumb markings. Time for the cape. I make a half circle with some black fabric, and who recognizes this red silky fabric? I cut another tiny circle in the middle, and if you weren't listening, you might think I'm making a circle skirt. I'm making a cape. Anyway, with the black fabric, I make my own bias binding. Basically a strip of fabric folded in on itself to hide all the raw edges. I made enough to go around the whole thing minus the neck hole, and I sew it around. Beautiful. For the hood, I took the doll's head and made a gigantic margin around it because I suck at making hoods. This even turned out a little tight. I sewed the rounded edge and hemmed the straight edge that goes around her face. I attached the hood to the cape right sides together, and I thought it looked kind of bad, so I kind of made a bad French seam. When you sew wrong sides together, trim the edge of the fabric as much as you can, and sew it right sides together to hide the raw edges inside the little loop you made. I didn't mean for this to happen, but it actually worked out to my advantage. I took a long needle and some embroidery thread and threaded it the best I could through the French seam and out the other side. I messed up this time, but the next time I went back through the other side the best I could again and make sure to leave a loop. I installed a hook and eye closure to keep the thread hidden on the other side and secure it. It worked out great. Pants time. Pants are a little weird because I want a sheer panel on the side seam. I make a pattern like I normally would, but when I actually cut out the fabric, cut the side seams a little less so I can fit the mesh. I sewed the front to the mesh on the sides right sides together, and then I sewed the crotch seams right sides together. And since it's going to be difficult to measure, I did a whip stitch to attach the mesh to the other side and cut the excess mesh. I liked it, but I thought I could use some more texture. I took some black embroidery thread and made a crisscross pattern. I like how it adds more detail, although I can't take her pants off now. Back to the corset. I thought it looked plain, so I dry brushed the corset with some darker shades of brown and attached some red embroidery thread to kind of make boning. It came out a little messy, but she's kind of a rough and tough girl anyway. Remember this piece? I attached it to a back piece I drafted and put it on the doll. I coat the spots I know will touch the corset with tacky glue again and stick it on there. I did take it all off to make sure it was secure, but once it was, I put it back on and tie her in with some more embroidery thread in the back. I made her boots from the boots she came with. I marked on some faux leather where the contour lines of the boots were. I kind of tried to melt the boots so they were out of the way more, but it turned out kind of weird. I hot glued one side and the other side and filled in the heel bit to make it solid. I then stuck it down on a smaller piece of faux leather and cut out the sole piece of her shoe. Cool! To hide the seam in the front, I took some more embroidery thread and I covered it up. I would have used ribbon, but I didn't have any thin black ribbon on me. So for the walls, I guess you would call them, I used more faux leather and measured around her leg and made a weird rectangle. I wanted to attach it to the boots with some mini fasteners I got at Joann's, but the fabric was too thick to work. But I still attached the fasteners to the leather piece for some extra detail. But I actually attached the leather piece by sewing the two together with embroidery thread. And I laced her up in the back with, can you guess? More embroidery thread. I thought it looked plain again, so I dry brushed it and it came out pretty cool. For her Plague Doctor mask, I used foam again and traced out these shapes. I cut them out and to give it a rustic feel, I stitched them together. This was actually pretty therapeutic and I think it turned out amazing. I painted a base layer of white and set it aside. To make the goggle pieces, I brought out the hot glue again and made some blobs on this coaster silicone mold for resin. I picked two that looked similar and painted the backside with its color shift iridescent paint. I did change it to this pink one because it matched better. I used scrap foam to cut into strips to make a border and paint it like the mask. I attached the goggles with hot glue again and dry brushed the whole thing. While I was at it, I got out the gold paint and dry brushed some of it on everything to add some shine. Off camera, I painted gloves on her arms and made a staff with a skewer and polymer clay bird skull and I attached it. A few extra details and she's done. I absolutely love how she turned out. Some things didn't go to plan, thanks Warbler, but I still love her. I think I have a soft spot for steampunk because my boyfriend Jesus loves them, and I love dry brushing and making things look old and rustic. I hope you love her as much as I do, and yeah, click here to subscribe, click here for my latest video, and click here for a video YouTube things you like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Also, comment if you want a Phantom Thief custom sometime soon. Okay, bye!